She was 8 years old and she was staring at a plate of pancakes like it was a trap. Not hungry staring, not the way a kid looks at food they can't wait to eat. She was looking at those pancakes the way a person looks at something they want so badly, it scares them. Like reaching for it might set off an alarm somewhere in the house. Her hand stayed folded in her lap. Her fork sat untouched on the napkin. And when I told her, gently, to go ahead and eat, she looked up at me with her mother's careful eyes and asked me a question I've not been able to forget for a single morning since. "Uncle Ray," she said, "am I allowed?" 4 words. A little voice, thin as paper. Am I allowed? I spent 29 years riding an ambulance out of Station 6 in Erie, Pennsylvania. I have pulled people out of cars, folded around telephone poles. I have knelt on a kitchen floor at 3 a.m. doing chest compressions while a family screamed behind me. I have carried children out of houses I will not describe to you. And I learned a long time ago how to keep my hands steady no matter what my chest was doing. My hands did not shake when she asked me that. But something woke up in me that had been asleep for a year and a half since the morning I lost my wife. Something old and cold and certain. Because I already knew, before she ever picked up that fork, that my little brother had done something to his daughter, and I already knew I was going to burn my whole family to the ground to fix it. This is the story of the 4 days that changed everything. Stay with me. My brother Curtis called me on a Thursday morning while I was out back trying to coax something green out of a tomato plant that had already decided it was done for the year. I almost let it ring out. My phone was on the kitchen windowsill, and I was elbow deep in dirt. And I'd been avoiding conversations that week the way you do when grief is having one of its louder seasons. Marion had been gone 18 months. People tell you the second year is easier. People are wrong. The second year is when the casseroles stop coming and the house gets very, very quiet, and you realise the silence isn't temporary. But something made me set down the trowel and go inside and pick up. "Ray!" His voice was tight. Curtis had a way of talking when he wanted something. Clipped, fast, no room for me to get a word in edgewise. Our father talked the same way. I'd spent my whole childhood learning to hear it coming. "I need a favour. A big one." "Okay," I said. "What's going on?" I've got a work thing blow up. Houston. I've got to fly out tonight. I'll be back Sunday afternoon. 4 days." A pause. "Can Nora stay with you?" My chest did something warm and stupid, in spite of everything. I hadn't seen my niece in almost 4 months. She turned 8 back in the spring, and I'd mailed a card with 2 20s folded inside because Curtis had told me that particular weekend wasn't a good time for me to drive over. He'd been telling me that for a while. Every visit was a bad time. Every holiday, he had somewhere else to be. "Of course you can," I said. "You want to bring her by tonight?" "I'm already on the parkway, 20 minutes. He hung up before I could ask a single question. Did she have any allergies I should know about? What time did she go to bed? Was she still scared of thunderstorms the way she'd been the last time I saw her, when she was 6 and crawled into Marion's lap during a summer storm and fell asleep there while my wife hummed to her? 20 minutes, that was all the warning I got. It wasn't enough time to do much. I cleared the boxes off the bed in the spare room, boxes of Marion's things I'd been meaning to sort through for a year, and kept not sorting through, and put fresh sheets on. I dug a juice box out of the back of the fridge that had somehow survived since the last time a kid was in this house. I stood in the middle of that spare room and I thought, she'll want a nightlight. And I didn't have one, and I felt oddly ashamed about it. Curtis's truck pulled into my driveway at 4:51. Nora climbed down out of the passenger side, holding a backpack and a stuffed fox with one ear chewed down to a nub. I recognised the fox. Marion had won it at a county fair 3 summers back, throwing darts at balloons, and had handed it to Nora and said, "His name is Copper, and he's a very good listener." Nora had believed her completely. Copper was grey at the edges now from being held too much. "Hey there, kiddo," I said. She walked over and stopped about a foot away from me and just stood there. Didn't hug me, didn't say hi. Held that fox against her chest and looked up at me and then looked at the ground. She looked small. That was the thing I couldn't stop noticing. Kids are supposed to look bigger every time you see them. You blink and they've shot up 2 inches and lost a tooth and started using words they definitely learned at school. But Nora looked smaller than the last time, like something had been taking away from her instead of adding. Curtis was already yanking her bag out of the truck bed. He handed it to me without meeting my eyes. "Clothes for 4 days," She knows the routine. He rattled it off like a checklist. Bedtime's 8, not a minute later. No snacks between meals. She'll ask, don't give in. And she finishes what's on her plate, or the plate goes away. That's the rule. Don't let her play you. I stood there holding my niece's bag, and I looked at my brother. He had lines around his mouth I didn't remember. His jaw was set hard, the exact way our father's jaw used to set at the dinner table. Right before things went bad, there was something coiled in him, something wound too tight. "Kurt," I said, "come in for a minute. Have a coffee before you drive to the airport." "Can't. Traffic." He crouched down, ruffled Nora's hair once, quick, mechanical, like he was checking a box on a form, and said, "Be good for your uncle." He was back in the truck before she could answer, backed out of my driveway without a wave, without looking back. Nora and I stood on my front walk and watched the truck disappear around the corner. She kept looking at the empty spot where it had been, long after it was gone. "You hungry?" I asked her. She shook her head. Didn't speak. "That's all right," I said. "Come on in. Some kids need time, I knew that. You can't rush a quiet child. You wait and you pay attention to what they do instead of what they say." What Nora did that first evening told me more than any words could have. I made spaghetti, because it's the one thing I can make that Marion couldn't complain about from beyond the grave. Nora sat at the kitchen table while I cooked, and she watched cartoons on the little TV in the corner with the sound low, and she held copper the whole time, except she wasn't really watching the cartoons. She was watching the doorway, the whole time. Every time the pan clattered or the water hissed over, her eyes flicked to that doorway between the kitchen and the hall. Not to me, not to the TV, to the empty doorway, like she was waiting for someone to come through it, like she was bracing for it. I served her a small bowl. She ate maybe half of it, pushing the rest around, cutting the noodles into smaller and smaller pieces. When she was done, she didn't leave the table. She sat with her hands in her lap and looked at me, and then at the doorway, and then at me. "You can go watch TV on the couch if you want, sweetheart," I told her. "You don't have to sit at the table." She got up very carefully, like the chair might be wired, and carried her bowl to the sink and rinsed it out without being asked. 8 years old, rinsing her own dishes, and putting them in the drainer like a little soldier. I said goodnight to her at 8, right on the dot, because she'd started getting anxious as the clock crept toward it. I left the hall light on, I left her door open, and I lay awake in my own bed for a long time, listening to the house, hearing nothing, which was somehow worse than hearing something. I told myself I was reading too much into it. Grief makes you strange. Maybe I was just lonely, hungry to be needed, inventing a crisis so I'd have something to do besides miss my wife. I told myself that right up until the next morning. Friday morning, I made pancakes. Marion had a cast iron griddle that had been her mother's, seasoned black over 50 years, and it was one of maybe 6 things in the whole house I couldn't make myself box up. I hadn't used it since she died. I got it out that morning without really deciding to. I made a stack of pancakes, gave Nora 3, poured her a glass of milk, put the butter and syrup right in front of her, where she could reach. Then I sat down across from her with my coffee. She stared at the plate. Her hands were in her lap. She looked at those pancakes the way I described to you at the start, like she wanted them more than anything, and wasn't sure the wanting was allowed. "Go ahead, honey," I said. "Dig in." She reached out. Slow. Picked up the fork. And then she stopped and set it back down and folded her hands again. That's when the cold thing settled in my chest. I set my mug down, very carefully, the way I'd trained myself to move in a scene when panic wasn't useful and would only scare people. I kept my voice easy. "Hey, everything okay?" She looked up at me. Those careful eyes. Her mother, Colleen, had eyes like that. Colleen, who'd left when Nora was 3 and never really came back, which is a whole other sadness I won't get into here. "Uncle Ray," she said. "Am I allowed?" "Allowed?" I kept my hands loose on the table. "Allowed to eat, you mean? Of course you are allowed. It's breakfast." Her lip trembled, and then she asked me the second question, the one that finished the job. "Am I in trouble? I didn't finish my dinner last night." I made myself breathe. In through the nose, slow. 29 years of running toward the worst days of strangers' lives, and I'd never wanted to put my head down on a table and weep quite the way I did in that moment. "You are not in trouble," I told her. "Nora, look at me. You're a guest in my house. You are family. In this house, you eat whatever you want, whenever you're hungry. And nobody is ever going to take a plate away from you or be angry at you for not finishing. That is a promise. She looked at me for a long moment, weighing it, deciding whether to believe it. Then she picked up the fork. And she ate. Not the way a hungry kid eats, the way a starving kid eats, fast and quiet, barely looking up, the fork moving like she was afraid the food might vanish. She cleaned the whole plate, every crumb, every drop of syrup, chased around with her finger. And when she was done, she looked up at me, and the thing on her face wasn't the satisfaction of a good breakfast. It was relief, pure aching relief, the kind of relief that has no business being on the face of an 8-year-old at a kitchen table. I got up and made her 3 more pancakes. My hands did not shake. She ate every one of those too. After breakfast, she went to wash up, and I stood at the sink for a while and didn't move. Outside my kitchen window, a neighbour's sprinkler ticked on. A car went by. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and gave up. It was an ordinary Friday morning in Erie. Inside my chest, something I'd shut off a long time ago was coming back online. I went to the little desk in the corner of my bedroom. In the bottom drawer, under some old paperwork, I still had a stack of the run report forms I'd used for years. The ones we filled out after every call. The ones that had to be exact, because someday a lawyer might read them out loud in a courtroom. I don't even know why I still had them. I pulled one out and I found a pen, and I wrote the date at the top. Friday, 8:40 a.m. And then, without really deciding to, I started writing a report. The way you do when your training takes the wheel and your conscious mind is just along for the ride. Subject: Nora, female, age 8. Observed unwillingness to begin eating without explicit permission. Asked verbatim, "Am I allowed?" Asked whether she was in trouble for not finishing prior evening's dinner. Consumed 2 full servings of pancakes rapidly after being reassured. No food left on plate. Visible relief following reassurance that food was freely available. I stopped, read it back, and then I wrote one more line. Guardian's instruction at drop-off. No snacks between meals. She finishes her plate or the plate goes away. I set the pen down. Then I picked up my phone and called my daughter. Claire lives in Chicago. She's 34, an ICU nurse, sharp as a scalpel, and she picked up on the second ring, even though it was barely past 7 her time, and I never called before 9. Dad, what's wrong? When did you last see Nora? A pause. The 4th maybe, at Aunt Rosalind's cookout. Why? How did she seem to you? Claire went quiet. The specific kind of quiet that means someone is going back over a memory they didn't look at closely enough the first time. Subdued, she said finally. Real quiet. I figured she was just shy or tired, and Curtis was being, I don't know, wound up, snappy. There were all these rules. Don't run, don't interrupt, sit down, finish your plate, or we leave. I thought he was just being an uptight single dad, honestly. I felt bad for the kid, but I didn't think... She stopped. Dad, what's going on? She asked me if she was allowed to eat breakfast, I said. She asked if she was in trouble for not finishing her dinner. She ate like she hadn't eaten in a week. The line was silent for a long moment. Oh no, Claire said very softly. I need you to keep your phone on this weekend, I said. I don't know what this is yet, but I'm paying attention now, and I'm not going to stop. I found Nora in the spare room after that, sitting cross-legged on the bed with a notebook, drawing. I leaned in the doorway and knocked on the frame so I wouldn't startle her. What are you making? She held it up. A house. Small square windows, dark walls. Everything drawn in heavy black lines pressed so hard into the paper they'd almost torn it. A bare tree in the corner. Grey sky. And a small figure in one of the upstairs windows. You couldn't tell if it was looking out or trapped in. That your house? She nodded. Nice tree. It's dead, she said flatly. Dad says it's dead, but we don't cut it down. I came and sat on the edge of the bed, slow, giving her room. Does your dad let you draw at home? She thought about it a beat too long. If I finished everything else first. Everything else like what? Chores, homework. Her pencil kept moving. Being quiet. I let that sit for a second. Then I said, easy as anything, like it was nothing. What's your room like at home? Big, small? She shrugged. It's okay, it's got a lock on the door. I kept my face very still. A lock on the inside so you can have privacy. On the outside, she said. She didn't even look up. So I don't wander around at night. She said it the way kids say things they've been told so many times it's just become true. The way you describe a light switch or a doorknob. Every bedroom has a lock on the outside, operated by a grown-up. Just a normal feature of rooms. I stood up. My knees ached. My voice came out perfectly level. I'm going to go to a start on lunch, I said. You want to help me? She looked up, surprised, like she hadn't expected the answer to a question she hadn't dared to ask. Can I? I'd love it. She made the sandwiches herself, cutting each one into careful triangles the way Marion used to, tongue poking out in concentration. And while she worked, I stood at the counter with my phone in one hand, typing notes with my thumb, keeping my eyes on her, keeping my voice light. We talked about her teacher, Mrs. Ruiz, about her best friend, a girl named Priya who'd moved away in June. You must miss her, I said. Nora set the knife down. I'm not supposed to call her. It takes time away from homework. She picked the knife back up and finished cutting. Dad says friends are a distraction. I wrote that one down word for word. That afternoon, while Nora watched a movie, I stepped out onto the back porch and called Denise Alvarez. Denise had run a unit at Erie County Child Services for going on 20 years. Our paths had crossed more times than I could count. I'd carried kids into ERs that she'd end up placing. We'd sat in the same hard hallway chairs, waiting to give statements. She answered on the third ring. Ray Bishop, you're a retired old man. What could you possibly want? I've got a situation, I said. Unofficial. My niece is staying with me for the weekend. The joking went right out of her voice. Tell me. I laid it all out on that porch, keeping my voice down so the sound wouldn't carry through the window. The food thing, the am I allowed, the am I in trouble, the lock on the outside of the door, the sandwiches cut into careful little triangles. Denise didn't interrupt once, which is how I knew she was taking it seriously, because Denise interrupts constantly when something's nothing. Ray, she said when I finished. That lock, a kid's bedroom door bolted from the outside. That alone is a red flag. You put it next to food restriction, and a documented fear response, and... I know what it is, I said. I need to know how to do it right, so it holds up. Document everything, she said. Dates, times, exact words. Her words, not your interpretation. Photograph any marks, but don't stage anything. Don't pose her. Do not ask leading questions. Do not interrogate her. Let her tell you things. If she doesn't volunteer it, you don't pull it out of her. I already asked one question I shouldn't have, about the lock. I think I spooked her. Then you know not to do it again. She sighed, and when she spoke again there was something careful in it. Ray, this is your brother. You understand what you're about to do to your own family. I looked through the porch window at the back of my niece's head, at that little grey fox tucked under her chin. There's a child asleep 30 feet from me, I said, who cuts her sandwiches into triangles like it might be the last food she ever gets. I don't care what it does to the family. Denise was quiet for a moment. Document everything, she said finally. And Ray. Don't take too long. Saturday morning, Nora woke before 6. I heard her, the small, careful movements of a kid who's learned to be silent, and I got up and found her sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, in her pyjamas, holding copper, not doing anything. Just sitting in the dark, waiting. I didn't make a thing of it. I turned on one light, made oatmeal, and let her put in as much brown sugar as she wanted. She put in a lot, watching me the whole time to see if I'd stop her. I didn't. We sat while the sky went grey to pink outside, and she told me about a book she'd read about a girl who could talk to horses, and I told her about a beagle Marion and I once had named Gus, who used to lie down on top of the mail as it came through the slot and refused to move. She laughed. A real one. The first real laugh I'd heard out of her. After breakfast, I got out Marion's old camera. Not my phone. An actual camera. Because it timestamps and it feels less like surveillance to a kid. Marion had bought it at a yard sale and forced me to learn it. Because she said the only pictures I ever took were of accident scenes, and she wanted me to photograph something beautiful for once. So I photographed beautiful things. Nora in the backyard, holding Copper up to look at the bird feeder. Nora crouched over a beetle she found under a rock. Nora squinting into the morning sun, grinning. And I photographed, as gently and naturally as I could manage, the bruise on her right forearm that showed when her sleeve rode up. 4 marks. Fingertip-shaped. Not fresh, a week old, maybe more. Faded to that particular yellow-green I'd seen 1,000 times, and documented on 1,000 forms, consistent with an adult hand gripping a small arm too hard. She never mentioned it, never so much as glanced at it. That was the part that got me. Not the bruise itself, but the way she was completely unbothered by it. She'd stopped noticing. It was just a normal thing that happened to arms. I went inside to get lemonade, and instead I stood at my desk and wrote for 10 straight minutes. Saturday, 10:15 a.m. Bruising right forearm. 4 discrete marks consistent with, grip. Coloration indicates 7 to 10 days old. Subject did not react to or reference the injury. Apparent normalization of the mark. My hands were steady. 29 years. That night she fell asleep on the couch during a movie, and I carried her to bed. She weighed almost nothing, which I also wrote down, and stood in the doorway watching her sleep, with Copper tucked under her chin, in a room with no lock, the door wide open, the window cracked 2 inches because she'd said she liked the sound of the street. I called Claire. She's scared of something, Claire said. You can hear it, can't you? In how careful she is. Yeah, I said. I can. Sunday morning I made pancakes again on Marion's griddle, and I let Nora flip them, which she did badly and gloriously, syrup everywhere, laughing when one folded in half. She ate 4. She looked for 1 hour like an ordinary happy kid. Then, at 11:35, Curtis's truck pulled into the driveway, and it all fell off her face, like someone had wiped it away with a wet rag. I watched my niece pull herself inward. Go small. Go quiet. Still herself. 8 years old and already a master at becoming invisible on command. She got up, got her backpack, got Copper, and stood by the door with her hands folded waiting. Curtis knocked twice and let himself in. You ready? He said to her. Then to me without looking at her. She give you any trouble? She was perfect, I said. Kurt, stay for a coffee. I want to talk to you about... Can't. I got to get her home. He had his keys out already. Say goodbye, Nora. Nora turned to me. Thank you for having me, Uncle Ray. It was rehearsed. I could hear the rehearsal in it. The flat, formal little recital of a kid who'd been drilled on manners like a fire evacuation. Nothing like the girl who'd laughed about a beagle named Gus 12 hours earlier. I knelt down and hugged her. Her thin arms came around my neck, and she held on. Just a half second longer than the goodbye required. Just 1 extra second, her face pressed into my shoulder, before she let go and stepped back and put the mask on again. Then they were gone. I stood in my kitchen for a long time. The griddle was still on the stove. There was a smear of syrup on the counter, and a dish towel crumpled where she'd tried to wipe it up herself. I picked up my phone and called Denise. Monday morning, I said. I want to come in and file. Officially. Monday, I drove to the main branch of the public library and used their copier to make 3 complete sets of everything. Every note, every photograph, the run reports, the whole file. 1 for Denise, 1 for a lawyer, 1 locked in my own desk. Old habit. Single copies of important things have a way of disappearing. Then I drove to the office of Margaret Voss. Margaret had practiced family law in Erie for over 2 decades. We'd been on opposite sides of a custody case once, years back, and she'd taken me apart on the witness stand so cleanly, I'd actually admired it. She opened my folder and she didn't say a word for 4 solid minutes. Just read. Mr. Bishop, she said at last. This is exceptionally thorough. I had 29 years of practice writing things down so they'd hold up in a courtroom. She tapped the photo of the bruise. This finding here, the grip mark, you're prepared to say the coloration puts it 7 to 10 days before the drop-off. That's within the window she was in her father's care. Yes. Margaret set the photo down and looked at me over her glasses. The locked door is the piece I keep coming back to. A child's bedroom bolted from the outside. She made a note. Mr. Bishop, I'll be honest with you. If we file a report and pursue emergency custody, your brother is going to know in about 5 minutes that it was you. You're the only person who's had extended contact with that child recently. This will be a war, and it will be a war inside your family. I've been in 100 courtrooms, I said. Never as the one starting the fight. But if that little girl goes back into that house and I did nothing, I won't be able to live in my own skin. I don't care about comfortable. I care about her. Margaret looked at me for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone. Cancel my 3 o'clock, she said. Something came up. By Tuesday, Denise had opened a formal investigation. She called me at 7 in the morning. I was already up at the table with cold coffee. Unannounced home visit, Thursday morning, she said. In the meantime, she stays in school. Teachers are watching. I've already touched base with the school counsellor. Your brother gets notified after we conduct the visit, per protocol. That gave me maybe 48 hours before Curtis knew what was coming. He found out in 36. Wednesday evening, 6:20, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. 29 years riding an ambulance teaches you to look before you open a door, so I looked through the side window first. A woman stood on my porch, mid-40s, expensive coat, dark hair pulled back tight, wearing an expression that could take the paint off a fence. Vanessa, Curtis's girlfriend of 2 years, wearing a ring on her left hand that hadn't been there at Easter. I opened the door. "Ray," she said, flat. "We need to talk." "I don't think we do." She walked past me anyway, the way people do when they've already decided you won't stop them, straight into my living room. She looked around like she was taking inventory. "I know about the report," she said. "You have any idea what you've done to him?" "I have a very specific idea. He is trying." Her finger came up and I noticed her hand was shaking. "He has been through the worst 2 years of his life. Colleen walked out and left him with a toddler. He has been holding it together by his fingernails, and you decide to play detective for one weekend and blow it all apart. He put a lock on the outside of his daughter's bedroom door, Vanessa. She sleepwalks. It's for her safety. She could hurt herself in the night. She told me about the food. That stopped her for just a second. Kids exaggerate. She ate 4 pancakes at my table like they were going to be taken away from her. I've seen malnourished children up close. I know exactly what it looks like. Her jaw tightened. You're using that little girl to settle whatever grudge you two have carried your whole lives. You were always jealous of him. You always... That may be the single most ridiculous thing anyone has ever said to me, I said, and I spent 3 decades listening to people say things in the worst moments of their lives. I will tell the court you have a vendetta, that you've been estranged from your brother for years, that you barely know that child. Then I'll bring the photographs, I said. She went still. The bruise on her forearm, I said quietly. 4 fingertip marks. I documented it, time-stamped it, and I've had it reviewed by 2 colleagues who are still practicing. That's a clinical finding. Not a grudge, and the question a judge is going to ask isn't whether it came from a hand. It's going to ask whose. The heat drained out of her face and something colder took its place. Calculation. If you do this, she said very softly, you will never see that child again. Curtis will make sure of it. Curtis can try. She picked up her bag. Think very hard about what you're doing, Ray. I've thought about nothing else since Friday morning, I said. She stopped at the door, hand on the knob. You don't know the whole story. I know enough of it. The door closed behind her. I stood in my living room for a while. Then I called Claire and told her the fuse was lit. The home visit happened Thursday morning. Denise called me after, and her voice was clipped and professional, which is how I knew it was bad. The kitchen cabinets have combination locks, she said. All of them but one. The unlocked one has cereal and a box of granola bars in it. I closed my eyes. The bedroom door has a slide bolt on the outside. Recent install. The stickers still on the hardware. The room's nearly empty. 1 lamp, no shade. A few books. A laundry hamper but no dresser I could find. Clothes folded on the floor. Denise. Her weight, Ray. A pause. She's in the 12th percentile for her age. We've ordered a full medical workup. Another pause. And I spoke to her teacher this morning. Nora's been keeping crackers in her jacket pockets. Doesn't throw away apple cores. Been doing it since the first week of school. I sat down on the kitchen floor. Actually sat down. Right there on the linoleum with the phone against my ear. She's been hoarding. I said. Yeah, the teacher thought it was a quirk, called it a quirk. It's not a quirk. No, Denise said. It's not. I need a full statement from you. This is going to move fast now, Ray. Fair warning. He's already got a lawyer. The next 2 weeks were phone calls. Curtis's lawyer turned out to be a man named Douglas Hale. Smooth, expensive. The kind who charges by the quarter hour and earns everyone. My neighbour Pearl, 72 years old and possessed of an intelligence network that would embarrass the CIA, informed me over the fence that Vanessa had been on the phone with the bank about refinancing something. Pearl misses nothing. I'm not above using what a nosy neighbour offers. Hale filed a counter motion the following Friday. Margaret read it and set it down. He's going after your character, she said. The estrangement. How long it had been since you'd seen Nora before that weekend. He's going to paint you as a distant uncle, running a vendetta dressed up as concern, and... She looked at me. He's going to argue the bruise happened while she was in your care. I know. We have the timestamps. We have my medical reviewers. We have your notes showing the mark was already fading when you first saw it. It won't hold, but he'll swing it. We need to be ready. We need more than you, Ray. We need people who saw Nora over time, not just one weekend. So I made calls. Mrs. Ruiz, the teacher, 23 years in the second grade, a woman who sounded like she'd been waiting her whole career for someone to finally ask. I've been writing things down, she said. I didn't know what to do with what I was seeing, so I wrote it down and I kept it. She'd been documenting for weeks. Nora never brought her lunch. She ate the free school lunch, the same one every day, and pocketed whatever she could carry off the tray. There's a child in my class with a severe nut allergy, Mrs. Ruiz told me, so an aide checks every child's bag each morning. Nora's bag has never once had food in it, not one time in 8 weeks. The aide thought maybe the family couldn't afford it. I started slipping extra crackers into her backpack. She said her father told her school lunch was plenty, and that extra food makes children soft. She'd written that down 4 times, in 4 places, so it couldn't be lost. The school counsellor, a young man named Aaron Kessler, who looked about 25 and carried himself like he was 60, had already filed a report of his own back in September, before Nora ever came to stay with me. He handed me a copy. Food hoarding behaviour, observed. Child's description of household meal structure inconsistent with normal norms. Attempted to reach guardian. Father returned call and characterised child as dramatic and imaginative. Dramatic and imaginative. I put that in the folder. Pearl gave a written statement. So did a woman named Ruth who lived 2 doors down from Curtis, who told me she'd once seen Nora on the front steps after dark in August, and thought the girl was stargazing, until she realised Nora was quietly trying the door handle. It was locked. Curtis's truck was in the driveway. Someone was home. The door opened after a few minutes and she went in fast, Ruth said. I told myself she'd been out playing and lost track of time. I told myself a lot of things. She looked at me over her coffee. I should have thought worse. I'm not blaming you, I said. You should, she said. I am. The medical evaluation came back at the end of the month. I read it in Margaret's office while she watched my face. 12th percentile for weight. Vitamin D deficiency. Iron deficiency. Growth markers consistent with a child who had been receiving significantly less nutrition than a body her age needed. For the past 12 to 18 months. 12 to 18 months. Nora was 8. That was a sixth of her whole life. That was every meal, every day, for as long as some kids can even remember. Mr. Bishop, Margaret said carefully. Are you all right? I set the report down. I'm fine. Hale is going to depose you next week. He's going to lean on the estrangement, on whether you had a prior conflict with your brother. Did you? I thought about it, really thought about it. About Curtis and me as boys, sharing a bedroom in a house where quiet was survival, where our father's moods were the weather and you learned to read the sky. About how our father had rules about food too. You didn't eat until you'd earned it. You didn't leave the table with anything on your plate. You didn't speak unless spoken to. About how Curtis had grown up to stand like our father, to set his jaw like our father, and how I had run off to become a paramedic so I could at least fix things somewhere, even if I couldn't fix anything at home. We didn't fight. I said, we just stopped being close. When he married and Colleen was in the picture, he was better. softer. Then she left, and he changed. And I told myself he needed space to grieve, so I gave it to him. For 2 years. My voice caught. I gave him space. And she was in that house the whole time. Margaret nodded slowly. Don't say the last part on the stand. It sounds like guilt. Say instead, I observed changes in my brother and chose to respect what I believed was his need for privacy during a difficult time. Cleaner. True. You're very good at this. I know. Douglas Hale's deposition ran 2 hours. He was sharp and precise, and he went looking for the gaps in my story, the way a good medic finds a vein on the first stick. He pressed on the months I hadn't seen Nora. He pressed on why I hadn't asked more questions at drop-off if I was so concerned. He pressed on whether my medical background made me more likely to see abuse, where there wasn't any. Where there, I kept my answers short, I kept my hands still. 29 years. Did you believe your brother was abusing his daughter before that weekend? Hale asked. I had no specific evidence of abuse before that weekend. But you suspected it. I'd noticed my brother becoming more withdrawn and controlling in the years after his divorce. I had a general concern, no specific evidence. So you had no concrete reason to surveil your niece in your home. I had every reason a responsible adult has. She was a child in my care. You photographed a bruise. I documented a clinical finding. I'm a retired paramedic. It's what I was trained to do. You reported your own brother to the state, Hale said, knowing it would cost him custody of his child. Knowing it would protect her. Yes, he made a note. We'll continue this in court, Mr. Bishop. The hearing was set for the 2nd week of October. Claire flew in 2 days early and slept in the spare room, and we ate bad takeout and played gin rummy, and mostly didn't talk about it, which is how the men in my family have always handled the things that scare us most. The night before the hearing, I sat on the edge of the bed in that spare room. I'd left the window cracked 2 inches out of habit. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Ray. It was Curtis. Please don't hang up. I'm not calling to fight. His voice was different than it had been in years. All the tightness was gone. What was underneath it was raw and exhausted, and something I hadn't heard from my brother since we were kids, hiding from the same footsteps in the hall. I've been in therapy, he said. 3 weeks now, since the visit. My counsellor gave me an assignment. She told me to write down every rule I had for Nora, and next to each one, write down why. A long breath. I wrote 4 pages, Ray. 4 pages of rules. And when I filled in the why column, his voice broke. Every single one of them was something Dad said to me. Word for word. Things I swore I would never say to my own kid. I didn't even know I was doing it. I thought I was making her strong. I thought I was protecting her from being weak, the way he always said we were weak. I couldn't speak. I'm not going to fight the custody, Curtis said. Whatever the judge decides tomorrow, she needs to be somewhere safe, and I can't stand here and promise you that's me. Not right now. He was quiet a moment. She asked about you. 2 days into that weekend, she asked if you'd be there when she got back. I needed you to know she felt safe with you. Take care of her, Ray. Whatever happens, take care of her the way she should have been taken care of the whole time. He hung up before I could answer. I sat in that room a long time. Outside, an ordinary night moved past. A car radio fading down the block. A dog. Then quiet. Some conversations stay between brothers. I'll keep that one. The courtroom was ordinary. Brown carpet, humming fluorescent lights. One of those ceilings that swallow every sound and leave everything muffled. Judge Patrice Nolan had a reputation for patience and none at all for nonsense. Hale went first. He made the case for Curtis the way you'd make it for any hard client. Grieving father, brutal divorce, good intentions gone sideways under pressure. He put up 3 character witnesses. A neighbour, a co-worker, a pastor. All of them said the same thing. Good man, hard season. Then Margaret stood. She laid the photographs down one at a time, without hurrying. She played 12 seconds of audio I'd recorded at my kitchen table that Friday. Nora's small voice. Am I allowed? And then she let the room sit in the silence after it. Mrs. Ruiz testified, and did not soften a word. In 23 years, I have only seen a child hoard food like this when that child does not have reliable access to food at home. I reported it. I was told she was dramatic. Aaron Kessler testified, quiet and precise, a young man who'd already seen enough of the world to have stopped being surprised by any of it. Denise testified about the home visit, the combination locks, the slide bolt with the sticker still on it, the empty room. Calm and factual. The way you have to be when the facts are ugly enough to carry themselves. Then Curtis took the stand. He looked smaller than I'd seen him since we were boys. He answered Hale's questions, in a voice trying hard to stay level and not quite managing it. I could hear the coaching in his answers about structure and consequences, the way I'd heard the coaching in Nora's rehearsed goodbye. Then Margaret rose. "Mr. Bishop," she said, "your daughter asked her uncle whether she was allowed to eat breakfast. Can you help me understand that?" Curtis's hands tightened on the arms of the chair. She'd done poorly on a spelling test. Breakfast was withheld as a consequence. So she hadn't eaten since dinner the night before. Yes. And was that dinner complete? A pause. There had been some difficulty. Margaret glanced at her notes. Your daughter is in the 12th percentile for weight, with deficiencies consistent with chronic, insufficient nutrition. Do you dispute that medical finding? No. When did you begin using food as a punishment? His jaw worked. His eyes dropped to the table. After Colleen left, things got hard. I needed her to take things seriously. Did it work? The room was very quiet. No, he said. Margaret set her pen down. Mr. Bishop, did your father use food as a punishment when you were a child? Hale was on his feet. Objection. Relevance. Overruled, Judge Nolan said. The room went still again. Curtis's head dropped. When he spoke, it was barely above a whisper. Yes, he did. No further questions, Margaret said. Curtis's shoulders were shaking, but he didn't hide his face. He sat there with his hands flat on the rail, and his eyes wet, and he didn't look at anyone for sympathy, which was, honestly, the most dignity I'd seen in him in years. I learned it from him, Curtis said into the room, to no one and everyone. It wasn't an answer to a question, it just came out of him. I told myself I was doing it different. I wasn't. Judge Nolan let that hang in the air a moment. Then she called a recess. Out in the hallway, Claire sat down beside me on a wooden bench and put her hand on my shoulder and didn't say anything. I was grateful she didn't say anything. Nora gave her testimony in a closed room with a trained interviewer. We heard the feed in a side office. When she described the cabinet locks, I concentrated on breathing evenly. When they asked her if she had ever felt safe, she said, "At Uncle Ray's house." 3 words. I felt them land somewhere behind my ribs. Judge Nolan deliberated for 5 days. The ruling came on a Friday, which felt right for a story that had started on a Friday 6 weeks earlier over a plate of pancakes and a one-eared fox. I have reviewed the testimony and documentation in full, she said. I find that the minor child, Nora Bishop, has been subjected to systematic food restriction, physical confinement, and an environment of fear-based discipline, resulting in documented malnutrition and significant psychological harm. These findings are clear and not meaningfully disputed by the weight of the evidence. She looked at Curtis. Mr. Bishop, your acknowledgement of the harm you have caused and your voluntary engagement in treatment are noted. They do not change what happened. They may, in time, change what happens next. She folded her hands. I am granting temporary full custody of the minor child to Mr. Raymond Bishop, effective immediately. I am ordering supervised visitation for the father, contingent on continued therapeutic engagement, to be reviewed in 6 months. With demonstrated progress, the court may consider graduated, unsupervised contact at that time. The gavel came down. Claire made a small sound beside me. I didn't move for a moment. I just sat with the weight of it. 64 years old, a bad back, a spare room with a window that cracked 2 inches, and a little girl coming to live with me who still flinched when a door opened too fast. Ray, Margaret said, hand on my arm. It's done. No, I said. It's just starting. Nora moved in on a Saturday with 2 bags and a box of books, and a fox I now knew was named Copper, which I would not be telling Douglas Hale, because some things are private. She stood in my hallway and looked around, the way you look at a place you've been told is yours but don't quite believe yet. I showed her the room, the yellow walls I'd finally painted, The window cracked 2 inches. "You can put things wherever you want," I told her. "It's your room now. Make it look like yours." She studied the empty windowsill for a long time. Then, carefully, like she was asking for the moon, "Can Copper sit on the windowsill, where he can see out?" "Copper can have the whole windowsill," I said. She set him there, facing the backyard, and the afternoon light came in warm around him. The first weeks were quiet. She ate everything and still watched the doorway sometimes. I found the food she'd hidden in week or 2, a bag of crackers under the nightstand, 2 granola bars in the pocket of a winter coat that was already hung in the closet in October, an apple core wrapped in a napkin at the back of a sock drawer. I didn't take any of it. I didn't say a word. I just kept the kitchen full, and I put a little basket on her dresser. Crackers, dried fruit, fruit snacks, and told her it was a snack basket for her room, in case she got hungry in the night. No big deal, just a basket. The basket vanished into the nightstand within a day, but over the next month, the hidden bag of crackers slowly got smaller because she stopped replacing what she ate. Slowly, she started believing the food would still be there tomorrow. The nightmares came twice a week at first, then once, then less. I got good at sleeping light. I put a foam mat in the corner of her room and slept on it more than a few nights, until she caught me at it and said, "Uncle Ray, you have a bed." "I know," I said. "I want to be here." She didn't argue again. In late November, Denise called. "Curtis has completed 6 weeks of intensive work. He's requesting a supervised visit." I asked what Nora thought. Denise said she'd been told her dad was in therapy, and she'd asked if he was sad and if he was learning to be different. She hadn't said no, which is not the same as yes. "She's 8, Ray," Denise said gently. "Whatever she feels about him is going to be complicated for a long time. Cutting him off completely doesn't uncomplicate it. Sometimes it makes it worse." I thought about my brother on the phone the night before the hearing. 4 pages of rules, every reason, our father. "Schedule it," I said. "My house. I'm in the room the whole time." Curtis came on a Saturday. He drove a smaller, older car I didn't recognise, and he sat in it for a full minute before he came to the door. He'd lost weight. The jaw wasn't set the way our fathers used to set. He looked like a man who'd been through a year in 6 weeks. He stood in my hall and looked across the room at his daughter, and his face did something human and undefended that I hadn't seen on it in years. "Hi, sweetheart," he said quiet. Nora looked at him a long moment. She was holding Copper. "Hi, Daddy." He sat down on the floor. Not on the couch. On the floor a few feet from her, making himself small. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know that might not mean much yet. I've been learning why I did the things I did, and I'm learning to do them different. Sorry isn't enough by itself, but I wanted you to hear it." Nora looked at him with those careful old eyes. Then she said, "Mrs. Ruiz says sorry means you try to change." "Your teacher's right," Curtis said. "That's exactly what it means." "Are you trying?" "Every day." They talked about a cartoon. He told her about a dog a friend of his had. She showed him Copper's name, and he said it was a good name. And he didn't ask why, and I could see that restraint cost him something. And he paid it anyway. When the hour was up, he stood, said goodbye, and asked for nothing. No promises pulled out of a child. At the door, he stopped. "Ray," he said. "Thank you." I thought about the 4 pages. About a dead tree in a yard. About a lock on the outside of a little girl's door. "Do the work," I said. "For yourself, not for the court, not for visitation. For you. So it stops here, so it doesn't get handed down again." He nodded and left. And when I turned around, Nora was still on the floor, quiet. And after a while she said, "Is he going to be okay? I think maybe he is." And she said it like she'd decided it herself. And then she went back to the cartoon, like that was enough. Like maybe it was. December came in cold off the lake. We raked leaves. She helped badly. And drank hot chocolate on the porch, while Pearl waved from across the street. We made pancakes on 3 separate Saturdays, which had quietly become a regular thing that needed no special occasion. The hidden bags of crackers stopped showing up in the sock drawer and started staying in the kitchen where the food lived. One Tuesday evening, I was doing dishes, and Nora came and stood in the kitchen doorway the way kids do when they've got something to say and aren't sure how. "Uncle Ray, can I ask you something?" I dried my hands and sat down at the table across from her. She turned copper over in her hands. Why did you do all of it? Because you're my niece, I said, and because you're the easiest person in the world to care about. But you hadn't seen me in a long time. That was my mistake, I said. One I'm not going to make again. She looked at me carefully. But how did you know? From just breakfast? I thought about that. About a fork set back down. About relief on the face of an 8-year-old. I spent a lot of years learning to pay attention to people, I said. Especially kids. I got good at it, and you're very easy to pay attention to. She looked down at Copper, then she reached into her pocket and set a folded piece of paper on the table between us. Purple crayon, I could tell from the edge. I wrote thank you letters, she said, for a school project. I wrote one to Mrs. Ruiz and one to Mr. Kessler, and one to you. I didn't touch it. I'll read it whenever you want. You can read it now. So I unfolded it. The handwriting was careful and a little crooked, in the earnest print of a second grader trying very hard. Dear Uncle Ray, thank you for the pancakes. Thank you for not being scary. Thank you for the basket. I feel safe here. Love, Nora. P.S. Copper says thank you too. I folded it back up. My throat was tight. Tell Copper he's welcome, I said. She smiled. First a small one, then the real one. The one from the morning she'd laughed about a beagle named Gus. I set that letter against the windowsill where Copper could keep an eye on it. Outside, the December dark came early, and the neighbours' lights were on, and the street was ordinary and quiet. Tomorrow would have its own worries. The 6-month review was coming. Curtis was doing the work, really doing it. And there'd be hard questions ahead about what came next. And I was 64 years old, with a bad back and a foam mat in the corner of a yellow room, and a snack basket that was slowly becoming unnecessary. But that night the griddle was still on the stove from Sunday. Copper was on the windowsill. My niece was sitting across from me in the warm kitchen light, and when I asked her if she wanted hot chocolate, she said, "Yes, please." Just that. Not am I allowed, not am I in trouble. Just, yes, please. And that was enough. That was everything. If this story reached you, do me one small favour. Leave a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from, and whether you'd have done the same thing I did. And if you believe every child deserves a table where they never have to ask if they are allowed to eat, subscribe. There's a story like this one waiting for you next.